All right, now we've talked about lighting. Now we're going to talk about rendering. So rendering, for the most part, is pretty simple. We've done a couple little bits here and there, but what we're going to do is you can kind of adjust your rendering process. So if you're doing test renders, things like that, we can work accordingly. So in the production mode, basically this is the rendering process that we're going to use the most. Active shade mode allows us to get a real life sample. And iterative rendering mode is basically kind of multiple renders. And honestly, most of the time, production rendering mode is what I use. I'm going to change it to Arnold because that's what we're focused on. That's the newest render for 3ds Max. And then you can move accordingly to your perspective. You can change your viewports and so on and so forth. But for the most part, I'm going to show you a tool that we use when we render. So if you go into rendering and you go into compare media in the RAM player, what this does is it ultimately gives you kind of a base idea. So you have different channels here. We're going to go in channel A and then channel B. So channel A, I'm just going to open the last rendered image, say okay. So this is my rendered image here. And then to show you an idea, I can go into the next thing here and change this light. So let's change this light to 5 just to give you that idea. And I'm going to render here, and you can see then I'm going to just load that last rendered image here like so. So clicking and dragging will show you kind of the variance difference between that. And you can click and drag back and forth and it'll work accordingly. And if you decide, okay, let's go back to 13, or let's go to 13 and render, we can just load this last frame into this channel. It's like so. So it's very subtle now, but you can still see that there's a little bit more blue going on and accordingly. So we can compare, and we use this tool quite a bit when we're looking at rendering several scenes, where you can just check one thing out at a time and see how it works. With that said, you can say okay and close that down. Now back to the render setup. You want to do a single output, or we can do an active time segment, or we can do a range, or we can do a certain number of frames. For the most part, if you're doing still images, you're doing a single frame. If you're doing a animation, I would do either the range that you need or the active time segment. And then from there, you're going to use the view that you rendered. For the most part, we can use the view. You can change the size accordingly. And as I mentioned before, right-clicking allows you to go in and change the settings here. So I can do 1920 here. I can check a number of different things here. Though honestly, we leave everything the way it is except for when you're ready to save. So when you're ready to save, you want to save as an output of whatever you're using. So in this case, I would use a TIFF, and I'm going to go into setup of the TIFF, and you can change different things. So we can store our alpha channel, and the alpha channel is good because when I save that alpha channel, and I'll just save. You can save your location. So if I put it on the desktop, and I'll just do save like so. I save my TIFF. And I hit save. I'm going to change what I need, be done. And so when I render an alpha channel, as you can see, this is my render here. And what I can do is I can save a number of different components. But my alpha channel is ultimately any transparency I have in the background. So if you want to add your own skies in, you can quickly go in and mask these out. Or you can show different types of color channels here. So you can see all of them. You can see, okay, this is what green doesn't look like, etc., etc. And then you can save it here if you render it out and like it, or because we saved it here, we can click the save file and basically render accordingly. Now, if I were to do a timed frame, I'm just going to go real small here, and I would do active segment, and nothing is going to render. But as soon as I go through here and hit save, and I have my saved files, what it's going to do, and in this case, I would create a new folder calling it test render, and then I'm going to save it in there, and I'm going to save like so. And then when I hit render, it's going to render frame after frame after frame. And so then you can see how much of your total animation is done and how much of the current frame is done. And it'll actually track as you render, it'll track and tell you how much time is estimated to remain. And then it'll tell you how much each frame takes. So you can get a little bit of information and kind of tell how well it's going to do. But honestly, I wouldn't worry about that. And if you don't want to render the animation, if you just hit cancel, it'll stop said animation. Then if you want to look at this, we can go into desktop, and we're going to go into test render here. And you can see on that test render, it'll save all those individual frames. Now this is preferable when we're animating because of the simple fact that what's happening is it's saving each frame individually. And say it crashes on 28 or 29 it crashes on, we can start then, instead of having to render all these over again, we can start from frame 29 and render what we need to have rendered. The other aspect of this is there's a couple different things I can show you. So for the most part, most of these settings are pretty commonplace and we don't change them too much. But here, if you want to get rid of your samples a little bit more, so an example here is, say you want a better camera. We can change this to 5, and what will happen then is it will save that a little bit more. I'm going to uncheck my save file, and so that render frame, and actually I'm going to go back and change to single frame. So that render frame now, so if you see, I hit the render here and it renders really quickly. But if I change these numbers to, say, we'll say 5 and hit enter, it's going to change your ray depth on here. So if I do that, you can see it takes a little bit longer. And as I start adding in more all the way, what's going to happen is ultimately it's going to change that accordingly. Now, for the most part, this is, mostly we don't use a lot of these. But the big thing is that we go here. If we're going to go here, if it shows up in, for the most part, if it shows up in red, which is the most common, you have a bad texture. It means you're missing a texture or something's not right. If it shows up in pink or purple, whatever you want to call it, it's a bad shader, okay? Now, you can uncheck this. So say you have something off screen that you know is bad and it's consistently doing an issue. If you uncheck this, it'll render without any error, okay? You can also go into system here and any type of old map. So say you can want to use like an old noise map or something like that. So in system, you can go into legacy and check legacy support. And what that allows you to do is ultimately use the older versions of shaders that 3ds Max offers. And that will attempt to make them work. And not always, they don't always work, just so you know. For the most part, that's pretty solid on that aspect. And then from there, that's pretty much the rendering system. There's a little bit more advanced rendering, but we'll pick that up in a later class.